We are back. Welcome to NVC Dudes.
Yeah.
It's a show, right? A show about nonviolent communication?
Yeah, it's a show. It's a great show. And that's a judgment, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I'm having fun. That's what's important.
That's right. I like the fun.
And I like talking about things that are meaningful.
Right.
Yeah, so last time we jumped in the deep end.
Yeah.
Talk about racism and triggers and implicit bias, and wanted to maybe talk about that a little bit more. So what's your understanding of triggers?
Triggers for me are the catalysts to feelings for me. So it would be like, and I'm always careful when I say this or when I hear this from somebody, or even if I say it, but if somebody says like, you made me feel uneasy, or you made me feel scared, you made me feel this or that. And there's a bit of an argument in my head that goes on about that, where it's like, well, I didn't actually make you feel anything, but I might have been the trigger that brought on that feeling for you, right? So that's kind of like how I connect those things.
Cool. I'm glad we're talking about it because the word trigger has different usages in the English language. So what you just called trigger, I would also call like stimulus. So you're stimulating something.
Right.
And so I think it's not too different from my definition. And I just want to add to it. For me, so trigger, totally we're in agreement that, hey, there's some kind of stimulus from the outside that causes me to have a reaction.
Yeah.
So the stimulus triggered a reaction in me.
Right.
And I also want to call out that the word triggered means that I'm in a state of reacting to the trigger. So it's sort of like, hey, there's a stimulus came in, and now I'm doing something about, I'm reacting without being fully conscious.
Right.
It's more like an impulse, like fight, flight, freeze, or appease. Those are the four categories. Appease is actually one that shows up a lot more than we realize.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother subject. Jim and Joy Mansky call it the submission. And there's a whole wheel vortex that we could talk about there. But so the state that I get that I call triggered, that's where really bad things happen, like really quick. Like if I'm reacting out of this fight, flight, or basically the fight response, that's the most painful one, right?
Right.
And especially painful to others.
Right.
And if we combine that with implicit bias, right, this whole racist thing that we have going on in our brains, and we're not aware of it, then we can react from that energy.
Right. Tragically.
Fight energy, or and in some cases, in our mind, we may be convincing ourselves that we're protecting ourselves and using force in ways that really don't serve life. So I want to have a conversation about what can we do if we notice that we're triggered. And I guess this might be a point where to call out, hey, there's this link we're going to put somewhere available that I put 8 steps. Is it down there?
Down the description, just the top line right there.
Okay, all right. 8 steps to stop trigger bullets. And I love that metaphor of the Neo in the Matrix stopping all the bullets.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what we're inviting you to do through this self-empathy process is hey, there's these bullets coming at me and I think I'm going to die, but if I can recognize that I'm triggered, right? That this implicit bias is causing me to do something that may not be rational. And if I can notice that and develop kind of a discipline, kind of a kung fu of dealing with these triggers, then over time I can develop a skill to deal with my triggers instead of reacting to them. So I want to basically get out of this triggered energy where I'm just reacting without automatically, and I want to get into this place of choicefulness. Right? I'm actually choosing what to do, and so you and I are going to talk in particular about the choice of practicing nonviolent communication.
Right.
So
because we got to do something with that energy, right? I mean, that's those bullets are coming at you. The energy is coming, and it's going to collide in some form. But what do you? Having some strategies around what to do with that is going to be interesting to talk about. But I'm curious, in this current sort of climate that we have, we recently. They've coined the term trigger warning, right? Now we have to warn people that something we might say may impact them or may create some stimulus, right? That we're doing this out of a caution for their safety. And I wonder if triggers can also be, I mean, with the trigger warning, you're making the assumption that the trigger is a bad thing, right? You're trying to get people to avoid the trigger. But is there a time when maybe triggering is actually a good thing, where is it creating a stimulus in you that will help you grow as a person, being aware of these triggers? And I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I could see that there might be cases where it might be helpful to get triggered.
Yeah.
I'd like to stay with the NVC thread.
Okay.
For now, the self-empathy thread, and I just want to call out, my own reactivity, and so I'm just, specifically around racism, just calling out that we all have implicit bias, especially in our culture in the mainland U.S. That we grew up segregated, and when we see people that look different than us, then there's something that goes off in our brain that's around that, survival, right? Fight, flight, or freeze, or appease, and so recognizing that is the first step. Is noticing, hey, I'm triggered now, and the best thing I can do is take a deep breath. A couple centering breaths, and hopefully I can start to re-engage the frontal cortex, right? The part of me that makes more rational decisions. And so if I can get to that point, then I can start to use my NVC tools.
Yeah.
And one of the first things, if we're able to do that, is to start to notice, hey, what are the stories that I'm making up about what's going on?
All right, we start with observation, right? So we're going to observe what's going on inside us, or
observe our thoughts.
Yeah,
that's I didn't learn how to do that automatically. It's sort of a journey to get there.
Right.
But that's one of the skills that meditators also work on. Is sort of be able to observe your thoughts instead of being stuck inside of your thoughts.
Yeah.
And just to notice the stories, and if we're dealing with racism, it would probably be, the colorful, the painful racist comments that we hear on television and social media, right? So that might be the story that you're making up,
right,
about what's going on. And if you're choosing to practice NVC, then my sense is that you're wanting more connection to life, more connection to what's really behind. What's your true sense of what you value and what your needs might be.
Right.
But so recognizing that thought is the first step.
Yep.
And yeah, in some cases, to be able to, sometimes old trauma gets stimulated.
Right.
So, it may have little to do with the present moment, that, hey, that stimulus or that thing triggered a past painful memory or a painful experience, and it's taking me into some other drama that I experienced years ago. It has nothing to do with the current moment.
Right.
So that's also in there, right? That can also be part of what's going on.
Yeah.
So that's, people often go to therapy for that sort of thing.
Yeah. So is that like a self-diagnosis in a way? Because, when we talk about NVC and we talk about the observation, feeling, needs, request, cycle. If you're observing from a non-judgmental point, would we say that, would we look at past trauma and say that, would we diagnose that and say, well, this is a reason why I'm feeling this way because of past trauma? Or I don't know, I'm just kind of curious about that. Where
I like your self-diagnosis thing, because that's kind of what we're doing, right? Because, or at least that's the invitation.
Right.
And we aren't always able to go there ourselves.
Yeah.
But I've also found empathy, someone skilled in empathy, to help me, just have a conversation about what it is that is going on. What story am I making up?
Yeah.
Is it, and often those stories are based on old pain.
Right.
And so I may not be able to do this alone, basically.
Yeah.
And, so getting someone to help me, connect with my feelings and needs is a great strategy as well.
Right. Right.
So that would be the second step, right? So, or I don't know if it's second or third, but after we recognize that we're triggered and we've formulated what story we're making up about it, then definitely tuning into our body. How is that story affecting our physical composition? You might notice your heart rate's up and shoulders are tense, maybe my jaw's clenched,
mm-hmm.
and muscles are ready to fight. So that would be sort of the next thing.
Right.
Yeah, and there were many years when I wasn't really in tune with my body, and I totally lived in my headspace.
Yeah.
So part of the growth of NVC is noticing what the body is doing.
Right.
And being able to put a word to it. Hey, I'm scared.
Yeah.
Or I'm anxious, I'm tense, or or angry.
Right. And then we connect that feeling with a need that's potentially not being met. Right.
Yeah. And so, like you said, our universal human need. So what is the cause behind the feeling? What's causing the feeling? This belief that my need for safety isn't met.
Right.
Or sometimes it's around justice.
Yeah.
I might have this belief that I need to protect myself, and that I might act in a violent way around my own understanding. Yeah, so connecting with that need is another important step, and I think the next one would be, hey, to mourn, to allow the feelings to naturally flow. Hey, realizing right now my need for safety isn't being met.
Right.
For whatever reason, it's not as satisfied as I'd like it to be, and to just have that be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, without judgment, just kind of let the feelings flow.
You could sit in that feeling and then give yourself some self compassion.
Yeah.
And
It's okay to be human. It's okay to have
Right.
feelings.
Right.
And to allow yourself to mourn that whatever need came up for you isn't totally satisfied right now.
Yeah. Because we can't really do the request portion, really. I mean, it's a different kind of request for ourselves, right? When we discover the feelings, needs, and then
Yeah.
we're asking ourselves, you can't say, well, would I be willing to do something? It's more of like, well, what's the strategy behind, I don't know, dealing with this unmet need, right? Which you said, it's like, yeah, self-empathy, self-compassion.
And before going there, I want to call out that if I really want to stop that bullet and get rid of it, mourning and allowing myself to just tune into whatever need energy that is. It could be safety or protection or support. Could be for justice.
Mm-hmm.
Need for justice isn't being met, and and then just stay in that as long as possible. And usually, once you have that emotional release, you're ready to go to that request strategy.
Yeah.
So given what I know about all this, what can I do? What can I do to better meet my needs?
Right. And sometimes there isn't a good strategy.
Sometimes there isn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes there isn't. The strategy might be, hey, I'm going to call Brian up and have a conversation about it because I can't do this myself.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that could be one, or just seeking some kind of support.
Or I'm going to write a blog or something, right? Yeah, something else.
Yeah, express yourself, film a video.
Yeah.
And this is, again, this is the kind of process that we want to learn and have it become second nature so that we can do it in real time.
Yeah.
So, so Neo didn't get to stop the bullets without lots of training, lots of kung fu.
That's right. Yeah, you had to start small and move your way up. And it's a practice. Everything we do in NVC is a practice. So it's like, I've noticed that over the couple of years I've been doing it, my awareness is much more acute than it was on day one. I can tell that it's a muscle that I flex, and I go to practice groups because I want to flex those muscles and make sure I'm not getting complacent with my kung fu, because it's really important for me.
Yeah. And I want to just call out that my own triggers through the practice of NVC, I used to get really agitated and say things that I totally regretted afterwards often, and that doesn't happen as often as it used to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well,
so anyway, that's a little NVC on the self-empathy process, and it can be a facilitated self-empathy if we're stuck.
Good deal. Well, thanks, James. Let's talk again soon.
Okay, sounds good.